Welcome everyone, Happy New Year! Welcome back to Get Good with myself and Tony. And as you may have seen, we have been joined today by a very special guest. I will introduce him again. You know him, you love him. He is one of the big Aqua Force boys. It is Solemn Vanguard.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the stream. So, let's just jump right into the deck now. So obviously, when you say Solemn Vanguard, only one thing really comes to mind, which is Aqua Force. Now, people who are subscribed to you on YouTube, and if you're not, you should be, will have seen that you've released quite a few deck profile videos now that Aqua Force has its GBC 13 support. So we've got, I think you have two different Thavas videos and a Blue Wave video, which is really cool. So I thought, hey, let's just cover them, like both of them, why not? And so right now I have Blue Wave loaded up. So this is the list from your video. I'll just go over it very quickly for people who haven't seen the video. We've got Dagger Master Draco Kid, basic starter, gives you lots of pluses on your restands. Brutal Trooper is a crit, even more pluses on your restands. And then we've got a 6/6 crit draw lineup. We've got the new heal, who's broken. 4 Stride Fodder, 4 of the new PG, who's also broken. 4 Chloris, 2 Bergios, 2 Gallias, 4 Foivos, 3 Tidal, 3 Meddler, 4 Valios, and 3 Arsenal Fleet. The G-Zone, we've got 1 Wailing, 4 Flood Hazard, 2 Tetraboil, 2 Lambros, 2 Alexandros, 1 Artyom, and then some standard G-Guards. Oops, this is wrong actually. There should be 2 Galfilia, 1 Ioannes, and 1 Ice Barrier. I'll fix that later, don't worry about that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, but I think the idea of the deck remains the same, which is that we see that we've got basically 6 restanding strides, so we're basically Overlord 2.0. You've got lots of draw power from your starter, your crit. Obviously we don't have the broken power of Melania and Sipla, as Thavas does, but I think there's still a lot of burst draw power there. And then as we've seen it from your videos, Chloris, combined with the new heal triggers and the new perfect guards, is just unfair.
Yeah, insane. But then again, we do have the control meta right now, so she becomes less useful.
Yeah.
I always say, generally, Blue Wave will just auto-lose against Chaos and Overlord, and probably even Gridora. I haven't really tested Blue Wave against Gridora too in-depth yet, so it's not really a great situation for Blue Wave as far as the meta goes, but if it were in a vacuum, it's actually really solid.
Yeah,
I
so
agree.
one of the things I noticed...
the defensive control matchups, being able to turn off your waves really turns off like your turns, and like you end up doing basically nothing for the rest of the turn.
Yep, it's basically vanilla at that point, so...
Yeah, okay.
I also, I also think that like Chloris is better in Blue Waves than it is in Thavas, because let's say you go up against a Vanquisher, or like something else that makes you choose something to retire, right?
Yeah.
When you're in Thavas, you're forced to retire Chloris.
Yeah, because she's the only one who doesn't have resist. It's very
yeah,
But
that's
in Blue
interesting.
Waves, you can choose to retire stuff and like try and keep Chloris alive until you can like start like spamming guards from your bind zone, right?
Yeah, but then again, if you're like against Overlord or Chaos, everything will be locked or retired, so...
Everything's gone anyways.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, one of the things that I like about this deck, in particular compared to a lot of the other Aqua Force decks, is that historically, well, I think from what I've seen, is that Blue Wave needs very little to get going. Like, you know, with Thavas, you have to have, you know, you're aiming for wave 4, you're aiming for all these combos. With Maelstrom, you're aiming for all these, like, same, like, combos, you have the Rascal Sweep and so on and so forth. Whereas with Blue Wave, it's even the old build, which was Anger Boil, and the new build, which is Valios, you need very little to actually get your engine going, and I think that resilience is kind of what like makes it very good.
Historically, yes, because back in the day, Tavas really needed a full board to do anything, but I'd say now that Alexandros is there, you could do things even with just 1 rear guard. So in the past, I'd agree, but right now, apart from Gallias, you still need a bigger board in Blue Wave to do something, because your restanders still need that 4th wave, whereas Alexandros can do stuff on wave 2 already.
Yeah. So one of the things that you didn't mention in your video that I'd just like to talk about real quickly is we're only playing 2 copies of Alexandros here, whereas in Thavas and Maelstrom you play like 3 or 4, because, like you said, Alexandros saved the clan. So why is it that we only have 2 copies of Alexandros here?
Because most of the deck is very centered around your restanders, and you usually don't even have the counterblast to go into a turd. So, and also Valios, like his on-stride is more valuable in the early game rather than the late game, because usually when you get like to the later strides, both will be at 5 damage anyway. So I always felt like the first stride Alexandros, it might be good, but if you can do Flood Hazard, you can get a lot of value there, even though you might minus if you don't have the Brutal Troopers. So like, I very rarely actually do the first stride Alexandros, even though that might actually be the more solid move as far as resources go.
Okay, and then speaking of first stride, something Tony and I have been thinking about the other night, which is, so we play 2 copies of Tetra Boil just pretty much as a third restander, just for that little bit more push, basically.
Yep.
And I think we agree that if you're on the if you get the very first stride, Flood Hazard is pretty much always the play. But if you get to ride grade 3 first and then you G-Guard, then
Yeah.
Tetra Boil and Flood Hazard are effectively the same quality of first stride. The difference being that Tetra Boil is a 2-2 drive check, whereas Flood Hazard will be a 3-1 drive check, assuming you G-Guard into the first stride. Now, Tetra Boil only discards 1 card as opposed to Flood Hazard's 2. What do you think, like, is that the sort of thing, do you think that's like something that you would consider more often? Like, for example, G-Guard straight into Tetra Boil, or do you sort of save Tetra Boil more for the later where I have nothing left, let's just go?
I think I would G-Guard and then Tetra Boil, because this deck actually shines even more in the late game than people give it credit for, because of Chloris. You really get like 3 ridiculous amounts of guards if you get that late, because you will have like almost all your PGs, you will have the heals going with the G-Guards and so forth. So in the late game, this deck is actually even more amazing.
Yeah.
And so I will often want to keep my Flood Hazards to really win that late. Whereas Tetra Boil is like, as you said, it's the same thing if you already G-Guarded. So why not go for that so you have your stronger turns later on?
Okay, yeah, cool, that makes sense. So one of the cool things I like about this deck in particular is that before we had Anger Boil to instantly turn on your wave 4 restands, and now the combo I just want to highlight real quickly because not everyone might know the combo is.
Sure.
This entire deck can pull off the Vanguard restand with just 1 rearguard. So I'll quickly zoom into Gallias here for people who are watching so you guys can read his skill in case you don't already know. It's a big zoom. And then so when he attacks, you can counterblast 1 and discard a blue wave. And if you have a blue wave Vanguard, he A, restands immediately, and then B, gets a skill so that when your Vanguard attacks, he stands again. So the attack pattern works that you attack with him once, and he'll probably be 9k, unless you use, one of your Margle clones. And then he'll restand immediately. He can then attack again for another 9k or 12k if you have the Margle clone, which is wave 2. Then your Vanguard attacks, be it Tetra Boil or Flood Hazard, which is wave 3. And then when your Vanguard attacks, he will stand and give himself 2k. So then when he attacks for the 3rd time, that will be wave 4, which will then stand your Vanguard. So you can get 5 attacks with just 1 rearguard, which is super strong. But of course, he has that upfront cost of discarding a card, which I think you and I can agree is a little bit painful sometimes, even with all the free pluses this deck gives you.
Yeah, but the thing is, sorry for
No
going
worries.
double there. You can go first if you want.
Alright, so basically the issue that with Gallias, I have a love-hate relationship with him. I love him because he does by himself turn on the wave 5 for the restanders, but I hate him because the deck is very xenophobic, and counterblast 1 ditching a blue wave name does come up sometimes, and that's why like you have to like play more blue waves than like generic Aqua Force cards a lot of the time.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. But however, what I do think is interesting, right now I only run him at 2, and in my current build I actually even cut him. However, once Gridora and the new Chaos rolls around, I believe he might actually become even better. Because right now, the amount of things you have to place on the board without Gallias is actually pretty much the same thing as if you were to discard. Like having to put down a Tidal and a Foivos, or a Foivos and a Medla and something else, is the same thing as putting down only a Gallias and then discarding something. Now, what will happen with Gridora and the new Chaos is that you will often only have maybe 1 or 2 rearguard spots open, and at that point you will not be able to get your correct waves with just Tidal or Foibles or Medla. So because the new chaos, the new stuff is so disgusting, you like resist doesn't matter at all. You will just put your whole hand on the board locked basically, and then we have Galphilia to open up like one spot, max 2. So at that point we need Galeas, and with Gridora maybe turning off a column, even though you can play around that, I think Galeos will actually become very, very valuable. So right now I am no longer running him, but then once Gridora comes around, I will pump him up to 4 and probably cut Titles.
Cutting
And I do
Tidal.
think-
Oh.
I do think that is a good idea because it is showing respect for the meta. And as you can see, the meta right now is leaning towards this heavy control favor. So when you're able to like put less on the board, not say less resources, but when you're able to put less on the board but still enable your turns, I think that's really valuable for the deck. And that's why I'd also agree that you'd have to like put Gallius to 4. I'd even say put Medla to 4 because she, even though resist won't have like as strong as an impact with all the hand locks, resist is still resist and it can still help.
Yeah.
I think
So
it
I'm
also
thinking
goes in with
maybe-
how xenophobic the deck is. Cutting Tidal just means
Yes.
that you're going to be less likely to misride, or you'll be less likely to be unable to pay Gallias's cost, I suppose.
Yeah.
What a world we're living in, where Tidal Assault's being cut from Aqua Force decks. Oh.
It truly hurts. But yeah, so I would probably like, if Gridora comes around and then the new disgusting chaos, I would say cut 2 titles for 2 Galeas and 1 title for the 4th Medla. And then you have a really, like, it's the only way to play around it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Give me just a quick second, and then I'll bring up Tony's deck. So one quick thing I just want to talk about, one last point, is the G-Zone lineup. So we've seen, ever since, pretty much ever since the flipping G-Guards came out, playing 5 G-Guards has kind of been the norm for a lot of decks. Now, obviously,
Yeah.
Aqua Force doesn't have that problem as much because we've got Galphilia who can flip herself face down. Like, that's pretty incredible. But you're still only playing 4 in this list. Do you think the fact that Galphilia flipping herself face down is enough to make up for that? Or is it just that you value the other slots more?
Yeah, that's the only thing, basically. There is nothing in the stride part that I would want to cut. Like, maybe Wailing, maybe Wailing. But apart from that, there is nothing I want to cut for that 5th G-Guard. So I could see people cutting Wailing. I actually went into him only like once before, but I haven't needed the 5th G-Guard either. So
Yeah,
far.
okay. So it's just kind of like a comfort choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes
I
sense.
think that's the same with me as well. Most of the time, I'm happy just using Johannes to flip over Galphilia and then just unflipping the Galphilia again. So basically, I still have my quotations 5 quotations G guards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's quickly now shift over to Tony's build, and I'll have to zoom in a bit. Just put on the stream. There we go. So we can see that from the get-go, his trigger lineup is slightly different. He's running 7 crit, 5 draw. So obviously the number of non-blue waves stays the same, but you're prioritizing the counter charge a bit more, a bit less. Sorry, yeah, no, a bit more
A bit
over
more.
the plus 3k from your Mogul clones.
Yeah.
So
The reason for this is I want to quote Maxime in his last Thavas deck profile video, is that once you start stacking Brutal Troopers and Dagger Master onto your restands, sometimes you will draw into those extra draws, and that just doesn't feel great. So I cut the draw down by 1, added another crit in, and basically seeing crits early as well, just on your restand turn, or your first stride restand turn, when you go 3-0, like 3 drive, 0 drive if you're going first, being able to see more of the crits early will just help in the push.
And I guess, given how greedy the deck is for counterblast, having more sailors is just good as well, right?
Yes. Because the Sailor basically reads Soul in Countercharge 2 if you have a Galaphilia face up.
Yeah. So, the next big difference is at the grade 1 lineup. Instead of playing 4 Chloris, 2 Burgos, you're playing 4 Burgos, 2 Chloris. What's up with that?
Basically, yeah, it's the... If you also look, and compared to Maxime's list, I'm only running 3 Stride Bait.
Right?
So that's why I have the 4th Gallias to hard tutor more for the Valios.
Okay.
Did I say Gallios or Baragios?
You said Gallius. It's
Alright,
yeah.
so I meant Baragios.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's also the concept that the deck is xenophobic.
Yep.
So I want more Blue Wave name. The Blue Wave PG also hits Blue Wave name as well. So
Yeah.
most of the time I'll have a Baragios in the back that I can proc with the PG and then go into Alexandros for to make like a mini Thavas Alexandros turn.
Yeah. Okay.
Thavas-esque.
Yeah. All right. What do you think about this, Maxime? It's got sound.
Right, so I can see why, but I feel like Chloris is just way too important. Like, I have had plenty of matches where even running 4, I didn't see her, and that lost me the game. Whereas I get the extra offense with the Alexandros, I think that's pretty creative. But I don't often go into Alexandros. I really like sticking to the restanders with the Brutal Troopers, and so that doesn't come up very often. And most of Baragios' value is actually in Gallias. And considering I only run 2, and even in my current build 0, Baragios becomes less powerful apart from his Blue Wave name.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that. I can also agree with like the Chloris part being super important, but if I was to change anything, I'd probably go like 3 and 3
Yeah.
to see
Okay.
more of the Chloris, and it's because just because of the heavy draw power you get on the restand turn, that if you don't see the Chloris, then I feel like that's up to bad luck and not really deck construction.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, makes sense. So looking at the G zone, I first of all want to draw attention to the fact that you're playing the 2 different artworks of Tetra Boil, and that tilts me to oblivion. But then I also want to talk about how instead of playing Artyom for the ride fixing, you're playing a Megiddo, and that also brings up why Maxime isn't playing Megiddo.
Okay, so I'm running Megiddo because because I like Arsenal Fleet's drop zone skill. If I ditch him and if I use him for stride fodder, right after any restander turn, I'll have 2 copies of him in hand, right?
Yep.
Which means should the shit hit the fan, I can re-ride and ditch him to ultimate stride.
Amazing.
So it's so I see Arsenal Fleet as an easy way to set up the Megiddo. And I want to bring up the fact I don't really like Artyom, as he doesn't turn on GB2 by himself. And since he doesn't turn on GB2 by himself, if I don't have a G guard on the turn after, then I can't on the first swing with Flood Hazard get 4 drives.
Okay.
I agree. Artyom is a really annoying stride. However, I am not running the amount of Baragios you are, so the ride fix actually becomes more valuable in my deck than in yours.
Okay, that is also very fair. Yep.
Apart from that, I have never, I've played Blue Wave a lot, and I have never had an opportunity to even use Megiddo. Purely because of counterblast, and also because my hand was usually so gigantic that I didn't even need to come back that way. The other reason I didn't run Megiddo in my first list was because I'm a poor boy. No, because I just...
Okay,
Says-
Mr.
said-
Full SP Aqua Force.
Says yeah. Says the guy who's an actual rock star.
I wish, but yeah, so I didn't put Megiddo in back then because just that, but I'm actually wondering, I might actually cut Wailing for a Megiddo. Then again, it has literally never come up, so...
Yeah. Just want to quickly say
Yeah,
thanks
I'll
Yuto
also
SJ for
agree that,
following.
like,
Yep.
I've rarely gone into like Zero the Dragon, be it Drachma, be it Megiddo, be it Zola, but it's just I don't know how to say it. It feels like a comfort card to have, just
Yeah.
in case the worst of the worst happens, the shit hits the fan, you need to do something, and like going into any other stride will not help win the game. Then there's the Zero the Dragon that can help. at least.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
That's the
I
reason
think
I run him in Tavas.
that's I heard that's what you exactly seriously said, because you say you run him in Thavas for when you just have nothing else to do, you just can't do stuff, you just need something. Whereas you then say that in this deck, like, because of how much draw power you can get, you just don't stack as hard. So you just don't, like, the situation where you are boned just doesn't come up as often. So I think I can definitely see where that's coming from.
Yeah, but then again, I'm gonna contradict myself right there. In Davos, I also draw tons, so it's like, I don't know, it hasn't come up ever.
Yeah.
It hasn't come up, but it's there for a chance that it does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I just want to talk a bit more about the grade 2 lineup now, based on what we were talking about before. I'll bring up the other list again real quick. So, you mentioned how moving into the control meta, you want to up the Gallias because he does more on his own, you want to cut Tidal Assault. I want to talk a bit about Foivos, because for the longest time, Foivos was the boy. You know, he was like, he went from, this card's okay, to, holy shit, he makes the deck pop.
Yeah.
What? Where do you see Foivos like fitting in going into the future?
Me or Tony?
Both of you.
All right, I'll start off actually.
Sure.
Basically, Foivos is there because he's not GB restricted, which means in the control matchup, let's say against Gridora, you can rush them hard on one column, and then you can like replace him after with Gallias if you need to. But it's the fact that you can like rush them hard pre-G to like destabilize them.
Mm.
Yeah, against Gridora that certainly makes sense because you actually want to fill your field before her dumb skill is live. So then it makes sense to just push down all your Foivos and Tidals and Baragios and whatever, so they can stop your column, but it's full already, so fuck them. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear.
Yeah,
on
no,
this
it's fine.
stream,
It's fine.
but on the other hand, he's still a little clunky because he still requires you to have this other column, and you have nothing that hits 11 on other column by default unless you have a Medla like in the back row. So what I will often have, and it's not really ideal, is just having the crocodile draw trigger in the other column just to hit the numbers.
Nice.
Because I don't want to really, I don't want to overextend my hand in the early game because this deck is very reliant on pieces.
Yeah.
And so that's a little awkward to me.
Yeah, and I guess like we were mentioning earlier on about how Gallios on his own like makes these super sick combos. He enables your fourth wave restand, and then when you add Foivos into the mix, it changes your attack patterns a little bit, which is kind of not what you want.
Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
clunky.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. Foivos, I'm not sure if it's Foivos or if it's Gallius' fault, but there's a lot of wave clashing. So like basically, if you have a Foivos and you have a Gallias, you can't call both and have both their effects go off, kind of, on a restand turn.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Which
unfortunate.
like leads me to a lot of games where I'm playing the blue wave deck, and like sometimes I'll draw into all my Foivoses, but I'll actually never call one. And it's the same.
Same.
And it's the same thing as well, because
Yeah.
on your perfect first stride, after like let's say a G guard, right?
Mhm.
You need 4 face-up counterblasts, 1 to use Valios' skill to call the Gallias and get him to 11 solo,
Yep.
1 for Dagger Master, so that's 2, 1 for Gallias' skill, and 1 for whichever restander skill you need. So that's 4 counterblasts you need. So I usually don't call out rear guards early so I can soak up the counterblast so I can have it for first strike.
Yeah, same.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, that's quite interesting. Like, because I'm pretty much surrounded in my life by Aqua Force mains. You know, there's Tony, there's Maxime, there's one of my own personal friends, Julian, who also has all maxed out SPs. So I've always been a sort of passive Aqua Force player. Like, I watch it get played a lot. I understand how it works, but like hearing you guys mention like, oh, you know, this is how the early game sort of works. This is how like these cards interact. That's really cool. So before we move on to the games, as I said, we're going to talk about both the big blue wave decks. So now we're going to move straight on to Thavas. And here it is. So again, this is the copy of Maxime's YouTube list, which... So I'll make an admission to the viewers, which is that, you know, we've been talking on Facebook a bit before, and I think like 2 or 3 days before your video came out, you like gave me the idea, you leaked this desk to me, you know, saying like, oh yeah, I've been playing Bubble Edge Draco Kid with Saber Flow, and I'm drawing like 50 cards and it's broken. And I was like, at first I was like, that sounds interesting, but is it stable? And then I tried the game, and holy shit, it was like, it's like playing OTT back in back in GBT3 all over again. Like, I can't hold all these cards. So this list is super thick. So I'm not going to go through the whole list like I did with Blue Wave, because it's pretty similar to the basic Thavas lists.
Yeah.
All I'll mention is that you've got Saberflow Sailor, who's Wave 4, retire her, draw 2 cards. So when you combo the new Thavas with her, with Alexandros, you hit Wave 4 super easily. It costs you like virtually no resources, and then like you call a Thavas with his own stride skill, put the Bubble Edge on him, then he swings twice, draws you 2 cards, Saberflow draws you 4 cards, you've got your drive checks, you've got your personal crits, you've got Orthea, you've got Melania, you've got Sipla. It's just spirals out of control. Like,
Indeed.
whoa. This deck gives me shivers whenever I think about how it plays. So one of the
yeah.
At the same time that I was working on my Thavas deck, I was thinking about Saberflow as well, because I had her originally in my Blue Wave deck, just as like a free draw too, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I completely forgot about her, and then I was just thinking, how can I make this deck more ridiculous? And then you released a video, and you started showing off your Saberflows. I'm just like, fucking hell, this is it. This is the key.
I mean, I agree, but it's weird because the topping builds in Japan are all the cookie cutter Mitros Rush builds, and I'm actually also considering running Mitros in this, which is awkward because I'm actually a big fan of Bubble Edge still.
Yeah.
So like, there's multiple ways. You have the super cookie cutter build, then you have this super draw build, and I feel like even a hybrid of those two can work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Like,
again it comes back
list
into
is
meta,
actually
right?
The exact same as yours. My list is actually the exact same as yours, except for I am running Mitros just for that call consistency and the strike consistency.
Right. Yeah.
So is Mitros not worse against all these big heavy control decks? Because he needs to stay on the field when you stride. You need to have
that's
slots
an
in the field
issue.
to do stuff with, and like you kind of need to have like be able to turn his wave effect on in a way. Whereas with Bubble Edge, it's just you just slam the cards, put him into Soul, do your plus.
So against Gradora, Mitros is very annoying already because one of your columns will be locked out already, meaning the other column has to be built in such a way that your Mitros can add a Tavas there without minusing, but you still have to hit that correct battle.
Yeah.
And then if the Gradora player is smart, they will make it so it's extra awkward for you. And simultaneously, if you're going up against Chaos, your Mitros will never go off, ever. And any Chaos player will just say, okay, lock it. Even if you don't call anything early, Mitros will never go off against Chaos, unless you Galphilia it, but then you're minusing so hard just to force it that it's super awkward. So, considering that meta, I actually think Bubble Edge has even more value. Considering that right before Chaos rides Grade 3, I will just push in Bubble Edge without actually drawing anything, just so I don't have a locked spot from the start.
Ooh, that's spicy.
So it'd be like you play the Bubble Edge because it can soul in by itself, but then for the matchups where you don't have to like empty your field, then Bubble Edge is still alive on like other turns.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
All right.
Interesting train of thought. I like it.
So you're only playing 6 Grade 3s, which for a lot of stride-focused decks, I think nowadays, like, the paradigm has shifted since the beginning of Stride era, where people have cut down a bit on their Grade 3 lineups, unless it's a Grade 3-centric deck, like, say, Overlord or Vanquish or whatever, and are just running, like, 7, like, or 6 in some cases. For an aggressive deck like Thavas, where your Grade 3s, well, some of them, now actually do something, like, how do you think, like, this has affected the play for you? Like, are you more aggressive with your Tidal Assaults? Are you, like, less aggressive with your Adelaides? Like, how does that work out for you?
Well, the reason I cut to 6 now is because I have 15 to 20 card hands, so I have plenty of stride fodder regardless. In the cookie cutter build, I would probably run like 3 Benedict and 4 of the new one because it's a little bit more risk oriented. But this deck is so ridiculously safe that I always have everything once it's live.
Okay.
So like I also run the old Tavas even though it's practically worthless, purely because even if I misride, I can start plussing so hard of everything that I will have the correct stride fodder and more from the turn afterwards.
Yeah, that you can just,
but,
like, re-ride into the new Thavas, and then continue to stride, and then just keep plussing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. So, one really cool combo I saw while I was in Japan that someone did that I just want to highlight real quickly is that if you notice New Thavas, his rear guard restand skill is GB2. So you can do some really filthy stuff with a first stride Alexandros. Like,
Yes.
really filthy. Like, call down a Thavas, you stride Alexandros, call down a Thavas, swing with the Thavas, do your other swings, swing with Alexandros on wave 3, stand your Thavas, and swing with him again twice. And it's just like, oh!
Yeah, it's insane. But then again, even once GB2 is live, you can still attack with it on wave 2 or 3.
Yep.
And then still do the same thing. For like the 3 is only relevant on a Lambros turn, but wave 2, like on an Alexandros turn, you can still abuse that, but not as easily.
So, Silent Pikachu Z in the chat asks, against Gridora, Gridora sticks grade 2 10Ks and stalls against Thavas. How do you beat that playstyle with this deck?
So riding 10Ks?
Yeah. Because then they deny your
haven't-
tidal assaults, they deny pretty much everything.
Right, with this build I don't rush. I don't even call down titles because any good player will just swing with Vanguard at it until it's dead,
Yep.
and then you miss your combo pieces. Whereas this deck really just likes, you can stall a little, and you will win on Alexander's turn anyway, because the second your opponent starts stalling you, that just means your G count will go up quicker.
Yeah, because we have the Sabreeze.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you say that you don't rush with this deck. Let me quickly load up, actually, the Cookie Cutter build, which actually isn't much different other than... Whoops.
Yeah, I was gonna make
Right,
a point
miss-
about the not rushing anymore for Aqua Force, because in Blue Waves and in Tavas now,
Yep.
I'm rarely like turn 2, ride grade 2, title, Vanguard, starter to the side, Foivas kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm rarely doing that anymore. Like, because you want to collect the pieces in order to make like better GB turns
Yeah, indeed.
nowadays.
I guess that could make sense, but then my logic would be, surely that with all the new pieces, your wave combos are much easier to set up. Like, you go from nothing to wave 4 smash you in the face a lot more easily. So surely you can afford to be a bit more risky with the cards.
No, because if you don't get your engine running, which means they destroy your pieces, then you don't get your engine running, so you don't plus, so you're left with nothing.
Right, okay. So, I guess the only real major differences between what you call the cookie cutter build, like I've got the wrong starter here listed, oops. Let me fix that. Where's Mitros?
Right at the bottom.
Yep, nice. Alright, so other than we're playing Mitros as a starter, the grade 2 lineup also differs. We don't have Saberflow Sailor, and instead we max out on Tidal, we max out on Adelaide, and we play a third copy of Thavas. And you've just mentioned that you're actually just going to cut old Thavas altogether and play Benedict.
Yeah, if I were playing the
Benedict
cookie
is
cutter
boss.
build.
Yeah. So Benedict is really, really good as well. But other than obviously how the deck builds, and you can now find your pieces more easily because you're playing 4 of them. Like, we just talked about how you're not really doing the turn 3 call your title swing with the side combo anymore. You're waiting for your big turns. Do you find that in the cookie cutter build, you wait for those big turns more often, or is it just a case of you're just going to try and push every turn with whatever you have because you're no longer needing to like draw 50 cards because you just don't have the engine?
In the cookie cutter build I would still rush, because this deck is basically, you call down your titles, you rush, then they have some more damage, so on the Alexandros turn they can not afford to take as much, whereas in the hyper draw build they will often still see 2 defensive triggers because you didn't rush early. But that doesn't matter because you did just go +5 because the deck is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So then next turn you kill them on Alexandros. Whereas this build, will win on second stride, whereas the draw build will win on third.
Okay.
And
I guess
and
the fact
so
that
I
you're already
would
playing...
still rush with this deck.
Yeah, I guess because like the number of Alexandros you have, like that affects it as well, because then you can't just spam Alexandros all day every day, whereas the draw build is also playing Dismal, so that you can just like stay that bit longer, get all your pieces, and then just like smash them in the face later.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So one thing I also want to mention now is this particular promo that Japan has that we don't have yet. called Mr. Freestyle Rider. So for those of you
Yeah.
who don't know, Freestyle Rider is a grade 3 10k with resist, and he basically just gets an extra 2k for every other resist unit you have. So I've seen him in a lot of JP lists, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, I guess it makes sense. All your shit has resist, it's cool, blah blah blah. But I've never really understood, like, what does he do better than other cards? So walk me through that. Like, sell me on Freestyle Rider.
Me or Tony?
You.
Okay, so I'm actually, even if we got Freestyle Rider, I wouldn't run him right now
Ooh.
because my build just doesn't fit him at all. I still wanted Dava's safety.
Mhm.
But I do see an option where you go really wave and resist heavy, even with Janka potentially, just to have high numbers and stuff.
Yep.
So then it becomes a game of having big numbers and then having your Alexandros restands and resist not really caring. I see Freestyle Rider a bit like the whale from Nitros,
Yeah. Just like, as that
or,
one off.
or the ox in ZTB. It's just a free big beat stick.
Yeah, and that can sometimes win you the game, I guess, especially when you like give it 20k on top with Alexandros.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. So like, now that we're moving towards the end of this section, tell me like, what other like secret stuff have you been testing? Like, what other options would you consider for both Thavas and Blue Wave?
Secret options. I've lately been playing a lot of Nitros. so for Tavas, there aren't really many secret options. I have considered this balls to the wall retire version of the deck. That sounds
Ooh.
really fun, but isn't necessarily very good. But so you would run 4 of the old Tavas, you would run Dinos.
Yep.
And you would just empty their field 24/7. But considering that decks like Overlord just do that better already, I don't really see that working.
Okay.
Especially since Nova Grappler now also gets resist on every single unit they get, so...
Yeah, it's kind of like, what do I even retire anymore?
Yeah, exactly. So, it's not good, but it sounds really fun.
Yep.
I don't think there is anything secret really. Like, as I said, Alexandros basically saved the deck, and you can build any kind of fun version of this deck, and it will probably work purely because that card is so good.
Nice. So quickly mentioning Dinos. So Dinos is the new grade 1 from GBC 13. He's a 9k booster with resist for Thavas with an additional skill. I remember you saying at one point that he sucks.
Yeah.
Why would you say that he sucks?
Because
he's a
very
9k with
awkward.
resist. But he's
Yeah, the resist is nice, but he's very awkward as far as wave count goes. He only works on 1 and 4.
Yep.
And you usually don't want a booster on neither 1 or 4.
Mhm.
4 sometimes, because of your ruler Tavas. But even then you don't, because you want to go 4th unboosted with ruler, and then boosted afterwards, which would be wave 5. And then he also costs a soul, which is not a big issue because you run Petros, but regardless you want to be watching out, because both Adelaide and Galphilia use soul.
Yep.
And it's also just 1 retire. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of him. However, the fact that he's wave and resist automatically makes him value. Like, they could print a card that's a 7k with no skill but has the keyword wave and resist, and it could be solid in Davos purely because it gives the back row attack. If it gives Janka a freestyle if you run them the power, and it has resist, which just stays good. But then you have Ortia, which is just such a disgusting card, especially with Bubble Edge. You can easily do a triple draw on first stride if you have the resources for it. You can do the disgusting triple restand with Tavas Tidal or Adelaide on a big Alexandros turn, which would make you go something like 56k, no, 51k, 58k, 46k, and maybe even a crit on that, so it's just unguardable. So later in the game, that Ortia makes her Alexandros turn simply disgusting and game ending. So I don't want to cut her.
Yeah.
And compared to that, Dinos is pretty shit.
Okay, that makes sense. So, talking a bit more about the trigger lineup as well, and Thavas particularly. So I think like the trigger lineup in Aqua Force is pretty much always the same. It's gonna be like some combination of crits and draws. One card that I've seen a bit of recently in my friends list is the Dolphin Stand.
Yes.
Now, I don't like the Dolphin Stand.
Me neither.
Me neither.
But would you ever consider him
No.
purely because he has
He's
wave?
shite.
No?
He's shite.
Oh, wow.
I think now that like you have Alexandros, you don't need stand triggers because you're always timing your attacks and you're always placing your board properly in order to maximize the uses of like of your boost, of Alexandro's skill to stand. So like obviously you're not gonna like attack with like boost of Ortia and attack already. So like you'd rather have like Ortia standing and then have her like boost after your Alexandros gives power. So
Okay.
like I stands in Aqua Force is like saying stands in Nova Grapplers. When the deck has like mechanics to like stand themselves already, so many times as well that you'd rather use crits to abuse that standing power.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and apart from that, the skill is still so wonky. Like back in the day, I could maybe understand it, but then I still didn't run it. I could understand it because you didn't have a lot of pieces at times, and so having a trigger that's also a piece could maybe get your engine going. But now that your engine automatically goes, like Alexandros enables battles, whereas back in the day, you had to enable battles with your rear guards. It's a very big shift because it makes the deck way more easy to actually go off with.
Yep.
So back in the day, you could need a dolphin stand because you brick, you only have triggers, but this trigger is still a piece with which I can attack and get stuff going. That's no longer necessary. It's less necessary than ever before, and so I think the stand is absolute shite.
Nice. Okay. So, one other thing is, like, I noticed again that we have Sabreeze in the Thavas list, and we mentioned in the Blue Wave list, which I'll switch back to right now, is we're focusing on that sort of, the restanding Vanguard pressure from your 3 restanding strides. Now, Flood Hazard doesn't need GB to restand, like, that's why we first tried him, because it's great, but Tetra Boil does, and if you get GB2 or GB3 on the Flood Hazard, then his value goes up, way up. Why is it, do you think that, or is it that you feel you want Sabreeze in Blue Wave, you just don't have space for it, or do you just not need it in Blue Wave?
Personally, I don't. I'll let you go.
No, you go. It's fine.
No, I went first last time.
Okay, fine by me. So Sabreeze, first of all, costs 2 Counterblast, which you just can't spare in Blue Wave. Secondly, your Valios skill won't go off, so that's pretty annoying already. And none of your rear guards are really more valuable because of having GB. Like, sure, you can't Arsenal Fleet, but what are you gonna do with some empty 11k attacks that still trigger defensive triggers? Like, Sabreeze doesn't bring any value in Blue Wave.
Not even for enabling, like, just that GB against stall decks. Because let's be honest, like, against stall, all you really have is Foivos.
Right, but that alone is actually pretty valuable already. Like, if they're actually gonna sit at 2 and hope to win that way, you can still slam down the Tidal Foivos and start cheesing with that. I don't see the value in wasting 2 Counterblast, which is so expensive in this deck. Only to have like a few mediocre skills live that are stopped by 1 defensive trigger.
Okay. And you wouldn't consider, like... Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Furthering more on the Foivos point, if they do 10k grade 2 stall, Foivos hits 11 on his first attack anyways, so whether or not they were grade 9k or 10k stalling, Foivos will cause cards to come out of their hand.
Yeah.
Right. So, we can see more that Blue Wave is a lot more resource intensive than Thavas. Like, you've still got triggers that go into Soul, you've still got 2 Supersonic Sailors, or in Tony's case 3. And you've got the heal trigger, which is really good. And obviously
Yeah,
you can't
it's so
play
amazing.
you can't play the countercharging PG because Yorgos is just insane with Chloris.
Yeah.
Do you feel
And
that
the Blue Wave name.
Yeah, exactly. So Xenophobic comes in again. Do you feel that some form of better resource engine for Blue Wave would push it above Thavas? Because I think like we're all in agreement that Thavas is better right now.
I think in order to make Blue Wave better than Tavas, the control meta should go. I think they also need some kind of zinc. Like if we could get a Blue Wave zinc, I would replace Baragios with it. But furthermore, the most important thing is probably a first stride that doesn't minus. Like just having a first stride that activates GB2 and then gives you some kind of plussing to set up for your later turns would really push this deck already. But not better than Tavas, because Tavas has all of that already.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
feel like given the current meta, Tavas is just better in every single way. Maybe once control goes and Blue Wave gets a solid first stride that actually makes them plus, that could make it a more even playing field.
I mean, there is an Aqua Force GB2 enabling first stride. It just doesn't
Yeah,
have the
I
Blue
know.
Wave name, so I guess that
Yeah.
makes it unusable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, not unusable,
It's
but
not unusable. It's just not ideal, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, one thing I almost forgot to do is, let's quickly flick back over and take a look at Tony's Stavas build. So we can see the trigger lineup's the same, the zero's the same, grade 1's the same. And like you said, like everything...
It's literally the same.
Everything's
thing
literally
as,
the same?
Maxime's, except for the starter, which is Mitros.
Yeah. So...
Because I'm not skilly. Oh, sorry, I had a bad cough.
So, touching real quick backly on the point about this aggro cookie cutter build versus the draw build, and you said that you could even mix the two together in sort of way. Is there, when you look at a deck like, say, Overlord, right? Overlord's very Vanguard centric, very control heavy, kills all your guys, draws lots of cards, but it doesn't ever straight up kill people. But then you look at decks like Nova Grappler or Spike Brothers that just, like, you snap their fingers and they kill people, but then if they don't kill people, they die. Do you not think that Thavas would end up suffering from a similar sort of problem if you're trying to, like, do the best of both worlds?
In the best of both worlds situation, you can act. The good thing about Tavas is you can gauge whether or not like you can safely overextend and kill them, or you can pull back and just like use your draw engines to kind of restabilize for their turn. That's why Tavas is better if you do go the mixed route. But I feel like just because of how stable the decks in the meta are right now, that you want to match that stability with all the draws the deck has to offer.
It's basically what Tony said. Like, this deck, you can choose to go +5, or you can choose to let them -10. So, you always have the option to play slower and draw a lot, or kill them. Whereas Spike Brothers can't choose to go +5, Nova Grappler can't choose to go +5, and we can.
Right, okay, that sounds good. So, I guess that does it for the deck portion. Let's jump into some games, and then see how we go.